Gentlemen, good to see you.
Hello, Jim. Hello, Ernie.
Good morning.
David, we have a special guest with us today.
We do.
Yeah, Ernie Sanders. Ernie, you have a background that I think anybody in cybersecurity wishes they had. You didn't start this yesterday. Let's say that. Nope. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yep. So I run our security practice for state and local for Peraton. We've been actively engaged in the last 7 to 8 years doing really focused penetration and vulnerability testing for state government. A big focus around helping our agencies really harden and secure their environments. And so Peraton as a company has spent many years, last 30 plus years around cybersecurity. We do about $4 billion worth of cybersecurity business. And so, but my primary focus is focusing on our state agencies, making sure that we help them keep the bad guys out.
And you've been a great member of the Tech Council, and we appreciate all your guidance there as well. Today, I think mostly I need your help with David.
Problem child, I know. So what I'd like to do is pivot a little bit more to cyber at an individual level, because people are being touched, not just in their workplaces and their businesses and state agencies, but on an individual level, right?
What kind of people, David?
Everybody. Everybody is vulnerable to the cyber threats that exist. And Ernie, you have seen it over many, many years. And I think you could probably speak to a little bit how much more aggressive and persistent the threat has become.
Well, it's not only become more persistent, but it has become much larger in scale because of the most recent breaches. I mean, just here in Florida, recently this year, the National Public Data had a huge breach. 2.9 billion records was taken, stolen from the agency or from that business and made public. That our data was made available on the dark web for $3.5 million. You could get all 2.9 billion records, which was names, addresses, phone numbers, social security numbers, literally anything. If anywhere in the U.S. you had gone out and done an application for a loan or an application that required some background checks, this agency pretty much did it for all of U.S. Because if you really look at the size of the database breach, 2.9 billion records, there's only 349 million people living in the U.S. That's a big number. It's dead people, people outside the U.S. that was doing an application, had to have a credit background check. So your information, Jim's information, if you've done any kind of application, it's available. My information was out on the dark web as a result of that breach because they were able to get, when I lived in a different state, at the time I was living in Oklahoma, I had done a application for a loan to buy a house. That information is now out on the dark web, thanks to MPD, who released all that data. But you take that, I mean, you've got Slim CD. They were just breached this year, 1.7 million records, credit card processing. Department of Homeland Security, or Department of Health was just recently breached. Thousands of records got released. So our data is now massively available on the dark web for any bad guy who wants to come and try to do something bad.
You know, David, I haven't shared this with you all, but just last week, I'm getting to the point that it's not just a breach that we have to worry about. And that's where we've been focused, is breaches, lost information, everybody panics. But the reality is it's no longer even just a breach. We created an email address for a new employee, put that email address out there, first couple of LinkedIn posts, in less than 24 hours, we had ransomware attempts at that email address sent in. They were coming from me as CEO of the Tech Council to this new employee. Urgent situation, need you to do this. That wasn't even a breach. That's just general information out there. They are moving on in
It's
split
spear phishing.
second.
So what I'd like to do with this discussion is to turn it into a little bit of a public service announcement. And I want to use a specific situation that has touched me as the use case to then talk about what happened, potentially why it did happen, and then other people who are dealing with this, how do they protect themselves? How do they protect their data, their information? So, I'm a veteran, and I have long since accepted the fact that my data is out there, right? When I was in service, we used our social security number to do anything. I swear, you went to the grocery store and you bought a bunch of bananas. They'd be like, "What's your social?" And you handed it out. So I kind of long since accepted that. But things have changed in the last couple of months. So about a month and a half ago, I received a fun little email. Came to my personal email account, and it was very targeted in how they framed it. Had my name, my personal cell phone, my home address. They had a key PII about me, very, very specific PII that no one's ever had all put together before, right? And it was in the body of the email from a name I never recognized, and it made it into my inbox. It didn't hit spam, straight into my inbox. And the email itself was interesting on how it was titled. And the attachment was a PDF. I knew better than to just open the PDF, so I did a preview of the PDF, and I was able to print it. So here's how it starts. It says, "David Clark, I know that calling," it gives me my cell number, "or visiting your home," and it gives my actual home address.
What is that home address, David?
We'll pass on that right now. I'm technically exempt from public records, but clearly this person has my home address. It said, "would be an effective way to have a word with you if you don't take action. Don't try to hide from this. You have no idea what I'm capable of in Havana," which is where I live. "It's important that you pay attention to this message right now. Take a moment to chill, breathe, and analyze it thoroughly, because we're about to discuss a deal between you and me, and I ain't playing games. You don't know anything about me. Not great grammar, but I know you, and you must be wondering how, correct?" So they start walking through how they've gained access to my home security system. They've gained access to my home cameras. They've hacked it all. They've downloaded my hard drives, so they have access to my family photos, videos, and they've been keeping tabs on me through the cameras, so they know what I'm doing. And this is where I knew it started getting a little squirrely. I think there's one part that says, "We know all the dirty things you do at home, and we have footage of it, and we're going to release it to all of your friends and family because we have all of your contacts lists." And I love to work out. I love to read. And so it's like, okay, I must be reading a lot of books that you're watching and working out a lot. So cool. But I will tell you, when they talked about my camera system, right, it was concerning because I have two little kids at home, right? I have a 12-year-old and a 7-year-old, two boys. So other than that part, I was like, whatever. But that gave me pause related to my kids and if they truly had video from my security system with my kids, because I have a pool and things like that, right? That bothered me. And, they go through this litany of threats and, they're blackmailing me essentially. And they say, unless, here's the fun part. The other option is to pay me and be confidential about it. We will name this my keep the secret tip. Now let's discuss what happens if you choose this option. Your secret will remain your secret. I'll destroy all the data and evidence once you come through with the payment. You will make the payment through Bitcoin only. I want you to know I am aiming for a win-win here. I'm a person of integrity.
Clearly.
And they say the amount I should send is $2,000, and they give me their Bitcoin wallet address. And they say, once you pay up, you'll sleep like a baby. I keep my word. And then he goes into a little bit more of a warning. He says, you now have 1 day in order to make the payment, and I will only accept Bitcoin. I have a specific pixel in this message, and the moment I know that you have read through this message, my system will catch that, and my system will catch the Bitcoin payment and wipe all of the dirt out on you once you make the payment. Don't even think about replying to this message or negotiating. It's pointless. The email and wallet are custom made for you. It's untraceable. If I notice that you've shared or discussed this message with someone else, hello, podcast world, your video will instantly start getting sent to your contacts. And don't even think about turning off your phone or resetting it to factory settings. It's pointless. I don't make mistakes, David. And then gives a fun little tip at the end. It says, honestly, those online tips about covering your camera aren't as useless as they seem. I am waiting for your payment.
Clearly, Ernie, he should make the payment.
He should.
Yes.
Because once he makes that payment, he can continue making payments.
Yes.
Because they're not going to stop. Once they hook the fish by creating a sense of urgency and getting you to think that they have information, and David, if you had not been watching Looney Tunes and been watching other bad stuff, then yes, you might have felt that they had something. So they're using fear to incorporate a need to go do something to keep information from being released. And so that's how they get in. And they do that whether you're an individual or you're an employee working for a state agency or business. The intent by sending that information to you, David, is create a sense of urgency. And that's what happens not only just at your home email address, but at business addresses as well, where they get the employee to have a sense of urgency. I create a sense of urgency, and I want you to react. I get you to react. I can then facilitate getting information from you. And based on information I shared earlier about all the breaches and the fact that your phone number, your email, your name, all that stuff is now readily available, they're able to piece it all together.
Right.
They're putting the puzzle together. They're able to send you something that looks authentic. We got you by name, full name. We have your home address. We have your home phone number. We have your home email. We probably have, depending on where the breach happened, we might have your children's information from other incidences where you've gone to a hospital or something else, because hospitals, government are the biggest targets right now. Education, those were, a lot of money is not being spent around cybersecurity. They have everything to create a situation to make you think this is real and you need to pay.
Well, they made it easy, too. They didn't say I need $1.2 million, you know, the days of Nigerian princes.
Not yet.
Right,
Yeah.
yes. So,
Although I will tell you, they almost got me because they mentioned they have my home security cameras. And then they said, oh, but nice setup, by the way. And I was like, oh, well, thank you. I do have a nice setup. They must be talking to me. And I am blessed to say I have friends in the FBI that I reached out to, just curious to have a conversation with them. And we kind of talked through all this. And they shared some key information, other than don't pay it, obviously. But what they shared was kind of shocking around the fact that how many people do pay. Because people have, maybe there's a photo from college, or maybe there's something, or who knows. But to your point, they're able to engender fear, and people will pay the nominal amount. And then what the Bureau shared with me is that person gets put on what's called the suckers list.
Yep.
And once you're on the suckers list, it never ends. And then they will sell your information to their buddies in the dark web network. And then all of a sudden it gets worse and worse and worse. And the number goes higher and higher and higher. And it becomes this kind of self-perpetuating system of pain. And so the takeaway was, like, you got to ignore stuff like this, because it's a more sophisticated spear phishing attempt that's based on the amount of PII that's now out there. But it is scaring people. I've talked to people, and I've shared this story with other people, and I've actually had many people be like, oh my gosh, that happened to my spouse, that happened to my friend. It's happening to a lot of people, and not a lot of people are talking about it from like a personal perspective. I think businesses are talking about the cyber threat. But the fact that now we have threat actors, and Lord knows where these people are coming from, like some nation state or some country, I have no idea, right? But the fact that Americans in their homes can be touched by something like this, which could potentially hit your pocketbooks, Ernie, that kind of feels like a game changer.
It is. And you were smart enough not to open the attachment, because what most people don't understand, you click a link and you don't know where that link's taking you. It might look authentic, but if you don't know the authenticity of that particular link, you could be going to a website that is now launching something put on your computer to access your cameras, access your computer, start leaking information out, opening the PDF. The PDF in itself could trigger malware. It only takes 30 minutes once they get into your system to create a back door to start siphoning information out of your system. And you don't know what's going on. I mean, most agencies that have been breached 200 days ago. The hacker's in there, he's in there collecting information, and then once he's at a certain point, Then he launches the attack. 200 days later, on average, it's 207 days on average that they're in your system. Then they launch the attack to go get your information and start collecting. I mean, the most recent breaches, those we heard about this year. They actually got hacked last year.
Yeah. So we've heard the use case,
Yep.
right? It's scary. It's hitting a lot of people. It's only going to get worse. But for all of our listeners out there, what could you be doing? What should you be doing to protect yourself, your information, your family, your bank account? Because it's not like you can protect your data. It's out there already.
Yes.
Ernie, before we do the what should you be doing, first, thank you for putting that out there. Most people don't. They hide from it and don't say anything.
I cleared it with the Bureau. I asked if I could, and they chuckled, and they were like, yeah, actually, put it out there. People need to be talking about this.
They do. They need to know this is happening. One of my concerns is whether it's within agencies or individuals' homes, well, let's say more businesses, the steps that they're taking right now, I'll hear folks say, well, actually, we set this up and we test our employees and we send out an email. And if they click on that link, a screen pops up. It's almost a gotcha. And then the employee needs to go back through training again. But the employee's not really the issue here, even though I think we're sitting at 68% now of the ransomware attacks come through somebody clicking on a link. It's a real high number, so congratulations for not being one of 68%. Yeah, but if we're relying on, okay, we're going to train this employee, they're not the cyber expert. There has to be a different way or a better approach for us to be taking.
Yeah, I mean, and to your point, Jim, what is being expected is now you become the investigator, right? You become a servant of the agency or some business to now monitor and understand when a threat's coming in. And you got to be smart enough to not engage in the threat. And, you know, as an individual, I was hired to be a developer. I was hired to be a business analyst or a manager. Right. Why is it my responsibility to protect the agency at this point? And now they're pushing that on the employee to say, well, you got to be responsible. And like earlier I mentioned, once they click, I have 30 minutes. Once I'm in your system, I load a malware, I'm creating a backdoor, I'm in. It only takes one employee to do that. Mm-hmm. So what an agency or business needs to be doing, they need to be investing on the offensive side. They need to be putting things in place that capture that email. You get an attachment. Mm-hmm. That attachment is routed to a sandbox. It's open in the sandbox and check for malicious intent. If there's no malicious intent, then you go ahead and send it to the employee, and the employee can open it. You've already vetted it. A link, you check the links. And most of the links are so easy. You just move the mouse over it, and you can see that if it says it's chase.com and you move the mouse over and it's something that goes off to UK or goes out to CO to China, or you can see that it's actually being redirected or it's some weird URL, you know right off the bat if somebody's phishing. Don't click on it. But they're getting smarter to where they're actually able to change the URL to make it look like it's something that it's not supposed to be.
It's interesting how you've done managed and enterprise cybersecurity and physical security for a long time. But the conversation at the end of the day, when you boil it down to it, it's at the individual level, right? The employee, the person, how personal identifying information is being used to fish and spearfish, whether you're, Ernie the individual or Ernie the professional working at Peraton. So it goes down to the person, and I think people are struggling because let's talk about it in the business context, which is your world, your bailiwick. If someone is using PII to target Ernie in his professional setting, right? Well, let's not use Ernie because you know this stuff. David, in his professional setting, using my PII, there's almost an expectation of trust when I'm at work. And if I'm getting an email that is referencing key data about me from what I assume is a trusted source, a domain perhaps that looks like my business or part of the company that I work for, like people are going to be susceptible to that.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, when I worked at the Department of Management Services, we had a situation where there was an email that came through. I'm in a meeting, and the email title says David Clark payroll changes, right? And I get this email, and I'm the chief of staff at the time, and I'm the acting agency head, and I happened to see it, and I'm like, oh, that's curious. What is that? And I realize it's a thread. And so I scroll down, and I'm like, what is happening? And I get to the bottom of the email, and it's an email from me, my signature block, to the HR director, and it says, hi, such and such. I'd like to make some changes to my payroll. I need to change the account number. Can you please start working on blah, blah, blah? And it gives account numbers. And God bless the HR director, because she's like, oh, this guy's the acting agency head. I better move on it. And the response is, yes, sir, we're on it. And it starts to happen. They start putting things into place and getting the forms. Now, I'd like to think at some point I'm supposed to sign something in that process and it would have stopped. But it had gotten pretty far along in the process. And someone happened to put my name back on the email chain, and they CC'd me. And when they were using Outlook and they looked me up in their CC line, it auto-populated the real me, right? That's how I saw it, by a pure accident. And so I immediately hit reply all, and I'm like, all caps, stop immediately. This is not the real David Clark. Like, real Slim Shady, please stand up. And then I got out of the meeting. I was like, I'll be right back. I got to handle something. But that was a pretty sophisticated spear phishing attempt where they looked at our org chart, we presume. They knew who the leadership was. They must have gotten my email because they emulated my signature block. It's pretty wild. And this was 2019.
Yes.
Like, how do you compete with that as a company?
It's got more sophisticated. Just this weekend, I was playing around, downloaded an app where I could have a video of Jim, and I could actually say something and then impose it on Jim, and Jim's head and mouth will move as if he's actually saying it.
That's actually happening. It's happening right now, Ernie.
On an app,
yes.
yeah. And so
I am not even here.
You're not even here.
No.
But it's gotten that sophisticated especially with AI and generative AI, more on the generative AI side, where I'm able to do things that are not natural to make them look real and convince people that something should happen. And now, because of all the breaches that have happened in the U.S. recently, and I would say the MPD is probably the biggest one because so much data was gotten that pretty much gives everything about you out. I can take that information to create emails like this. And if you think about you as an individual, you've got a smartwatch, you've got an Apple phone, you've got an Android phone, you've got cameras at home. All those require updates. And God, how painful are those updates. I'm getting messages, you need to update your computer, need to update your phone. I'm like, it's going to take time. I put it off. And then eventually it forces an update 1 to 2 weeks later. All those are patches. Internet of Things is what we call them, that people ignore, that gives that bad guy the access to your cameras at home, to your refrigerator, if it's a smart refrigerator or a smart stove. Those are all things that they are getting access to by hacking. And I've attended a lot of hacking events where they bring a bunch of bad guys in. I don't know that they're real bad, but they're there to hack into coffee machines, Coke machines, things that have chips in them, cameras in them, to show how vulnerable they are. And they make it look easy.
Today's podcast series is brought to you by MyGovGuide. With features like the fiscal year timeline, you can stay on top of crucial deadlines and budget cycles. Quickly access the state of Florida's organizational structure, giving you a clear view of agency leadership and responsibilities. Looking for opportunities? The Browse Bids page makes it easy to stay updated on active procurements across the state. And as a member of the Florida Technology Council, you get a 10% discount on MyGovGuide subscriptions. Thanks again to MyGovGuide for sponsoring our podcast series and supporting those who serve the public.
So I will tell you, this is, even though I'm not worried about it, and since this one, I've received 2 more, by the way. I've not acted on any of them, not opened any of them, quarantined all of them, and moved them to a safe folder. But it's caused me to reevaluate some things. So I'm upgrading my managed firewalls, both at my office and my home. To have a managed firewall at home seems silly, but I'm doing it. And my security system and my cameras, I'm upgrading all of it because of something like this, right? Now, I'm blessed to be able to do that. A lot of people can't do that type of thing. And short of me just like saying, nope, no more internet and plugging it out of the wall at my home and going, internet dark at my home to try to keep the world at bay. What can people do? And I'm going to give you an option here because I think there's an enterprise discussion to talk about businesses and agencies, and maybe you start there. But then I think we've got to talk about, because this has been a little gloom and doom, what can people do?
I think we start at home. I think
All right,
home's the
then
most
let's start at
important.
home. What do people do to deal with this and protect their family and their finances?
Well, first thing is when you get an email, if it's not from somebody you know, don't open it. I mean, the smart thing is I'm assuming you didn't open it, because most of the emails a lot of times can be traced once they're open. The individual sending you that knows you're real. Now, what they don't know is whether you're David or not.
Right. So I'll tell you what did happen. I saw it on my phone, right? And it was like the person was Penelope something. It's a very interesting name. And I'm like, who's that? Because, I have multiple businesses and I'm an investor in a bunch of things. So I get emails from a ton of people. And so I clicked on it on my phone.
You sent the notice to the
on my
individual.
Android,
Yes.
on my Android, and I read the email and I'm like, what the? I was like, that's a later email, but I didn't open the attachment, and so I marked it as unread, and then on a computer later, I looked at it and did the preview, so I knew what it was at that point.
So they knew they had a live fish at that point.
On my phone.
They don't know if that was the real David Clark, but they knew they had a live fish because you opened the email. So they knew the email tied to David Clark, which might have came from MPD, the National Public Data.
I will tell you, I thought about degaussing my phone and putting it through a shredder. I did think about doing that.
Well, the fact that you did not click on a link and you did not open the document, I mean, those are the first things any individual needs to do. The best thing is don't open the email.
Right.
Don't send the
But
signal.
what's the reality of that? If you get an email, you usually don't know it's a bad guy until you do open it.
Well, you can see from the
inside.
header. You see who it's coming from. And a lot of times it's like, I don't know that individual, or the name looks weird. Penelope is like, is that real? Probably not.
I don't know, Penelope.
Yeah. So I typically, because I get hundreds of emails. I get them at work and I get them at home.
Yeah. So to Jim's point, how do you not click on it?
Well,
to at least open it.
Just to be like, who's this person?
You see the subject, right? And usually in an email, you'll get a subject line, you'll get the sender, and then you'll get some text. So at that point, I see just enough information that says, I ignore this email. If it's important, they're going to respond to me.
All right. What if you're not that sophisticated and I maybe put
my
baby Velociraptor on Facebook for sale, and someone's sending me an email because they want a raptor, and yes, I'm referring to a dinosaur, not the truck. And so I get an email, and I'm assuming maybe it's something I listed on Facebook Marketplace. I don't know.
Okay.
Yes,
So in that case, you don't know, right?
Yeah.
Open the email. Now you've triggered an event. You've let somebody know. I mean, I used to have a small business, and
So
that
some
small
super
business
hacker in Nigeria
knows that you're live.
a red blinky light just went off on his
Yes.
dashboard. Great.
Yes. Because when I used to run my business, I would send out mass emails. I wasn't spamming. These were people that I knew wanted my emails. I would send out the emails to hundreds of thousands of people. I knew who clicked on it. Not only did I know that they clicked on it, I knew the IP address of where they clicked on it. Google Analytics provided me exact location of where that IP address
What if
is.
it's a cell phone?
I'm not sure on cell phones.
Okay.
But that's a good question. I'm not sure how it tracks back to a cell phone.
All right.
I haven't looked at that.
Mine was cell phone.
But the fact that you clicked on it, they know you're real. Now, what you do after that, don't click on a link, don't open an attachment unless it's trusted. So that's how you can
my
protect
spam
yourself.
filter didn't catch this thing?
It doesn't catch all the stuff. I mean, look at these agencies who have actually email spam identifiers, and stuff still gets through.
The spam filter did not catch any of the three.
Nope.
It came into my inbox.
It's why you can't. That's where we get to zero trust. Don't trust anything. You question everything as an individual. I tell businesses and agencies all the time, zero trust. You don't trust attachments. You don't trust links. You don't trust where it came from unless you can identify. And so as an individual, and the biggest culprit of this, not anything on old people, my parents are the worst.
Yeah.
Their technology is still old to them. My mom is constantly calling me and saying, Ernie, I received an email and I opened up a document. I said, oh, Mom, why did you do that?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden now she's got malware and she's got things popping up. We're going to call the police. You need to send money. And her computer's now beeping. And I'm listening to her on the phone panicking. She goes, my computer's going nuts. And it's constantly beeping an 800 number for her to call and send money to.
And you know what's interesting, I'm dealing with this with some family too. I would say there are generations that are more trusting, right? And there's an assumption that people can't touch them virtually, where maybe you recognize what a physical threat could be and you keep distance, but a virtual threat, they're trusting and they don't realize they're going to be taken advantage of digitally. Yeah, it's real and it's scary. And it's how bank accounts get cleaned out.
Yeah, but there's a change now that's happened too, just in the last 2 years. It used to be, if you just had common sense, you could usually target and find out, look, the wording in this email is atrocious, or it was terrible.
It's
in some
getting good.
cases. Yes, well, that's kind of what I'm going toward. Is one of the things that I'm seeing is it's no longer somebody learning how to do this. It's an at a service that they're actually
and they're using
purchasing.
AI to write this stuff.
Right.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, Jim. So we're talking about the bad actors, right?
Yes.
So all this data has been breached in the U.S. Actually, globally, stuff has been breached. Microsoft had a breach a while back where 30,000 U.S. businesses got impacted, and then 60,000 globally. Yahoo got breached. Home Depot, Target, Facebook. I mean, the list of all the big companies that have been hit. So imagine all that data is being collected. It's now available on the dark web. If I wanted to start my own business, I could quit what I'm doing today. There is now on the dark web a thing called ransomware as a service.
Yes.
I can go out. They provide help desk support. They provide a support center. And I can go out and get data that they will provide me, and I can go do a ransomware attack on a business or an agency, an individual, and whatever I collect, they get half through Bitcoin. So, no, it's not going to get traced. If anybody gets caught and gets in trouble, it's going to be me. I take that risk. But if I wanted to start a little business as ransomware as a service, that's available to me now. If I want to become a bad actor.
You're starting as a professional now, too. You're not learning through trial and error.
No.
You have all the tools.
And one of the interesting things, tell me if this is part of that game. I've had people come up to me and say, hey, I'm getting a lot of spam phone calls or phone calls from even numbers that are regionally appropriate. And it's someone who calls and they have key elements of who I am. And they're asking like to verify a number, and they might give me my home address or my cell phone, and it's 1 digit off. It's like, oh, is your number, such and such 1886? Like, no, it's 1887. Okay, all right, we just wanted to verify we had it correct. And they're like, what was that about? And I've been told they're calling to validate their list of data. They have your right number. They're just validating it's all accurate, because the value of their list on the dark web increases when they have verified the information. So it's like they're doing quality proofing on the PII they've stolen in order to sell it on the web so that they can perpetrate more fraud.
Well, and it's not even an individual doing it. It's a computer doing it. It's automated.
Yeah.
And it's more sophisticated than that. I mean, my phone, since these recent breaches with MPD, it's blowing up. I get text messages 4 to 5 a day saying, hey, let's meet for dinner. Hey, why haven't you responded yet? Are you on a desert somewhere? And I'm getting all these things. Hey, is this Kevin? And so they're looking for you, one, to open the text, 2, respond to it and engage and say, oh, no, this is not Kevin, this is Ernie. Well, I just validated that phone number that was on their database is tied to Ernie now.
Yep.
And so, to your point, they're doing a quality check. Do I have a live fish with a phone number and a name? If so, the email is probably valid. The home address is probably valid. Now I can facilitate an attack via email and try to get money that way.
Yep.
If not, I can try other routes to get money. I got your social security number. Might as well see if I can go open a loan real quick. That's the other thing. You were asking earlier, what can individuals do? The first thing I would do, and I've told this to all my family, go out to USA.gov/credit-freeze, freeze all your credit reports.
Say that again.
So USA.gov/credit-freeze. And if you just go to USA.gov, you'll see the link to it. That will allow you to go to all the 3 major reporting, TransUnion, Experian, and Equifax, freeze your credit reports. You can set them up just to freeze them. And that way, if anybody tries to get credit, they can't. You can set it up to where you can put a PIN. So if you want to get credit, you provide whoever you're getting credit through a PIN number. They're able to do the validation, and then it's locked up again. So I've locked all my family's credit reports up.
So that's a key point I think everyone needs to hear, because if you have children, you need to go lock their credit down too based on their social. So I think that's a key takeaway, where parents need to go freeze their children's credit report or credit, because a lot of families don't go check to see if their kid's credit is okay until they go and use it when they're 17, 18 or whatever at that point. And then you could find out that your child's credit is terrible because it's been stolen years ago. So I highly recommend you get out there, you freeze all of your children's credit, and at least put it into a monitoring program so you're watching for them. Don't assume that becomes important when they're an adult. It's important the second they have a social and they have a date of birth and they have a name, which is pretty early on, like birth.
Yeah, and it's not a probably or a maybe either. That was the one thing that, I'll get advice, and I have to admit, I don't always take it. And
right there with you.
Yeah. That was the first talk that I did. That was a statewide talk, and it was with FBI speaking on cybersecurity. And afterwards, the agent came up and said, by the way, Jim, go home and freeze your credit now, because your name's out there. Your target level just went through the roof. And for one of those rare times in my life, I did what I was told.
Yeah.
I went back.
Smart man.
Yeah, well, and I didn't think anything of it until about 30 days later. And I started getting denial letter after denial letter for college loans, for car loans, for home loans. And at first, it just made no sense to me. And then all of a sudden it clicked. And that's what it was. They could not verify. But, oh my gosh, we're talking in less than 60 days, probably 12.
Mm-hmm.
That's massive.
And the good thing, Jim, it didn't cost you anything to do that.
Right.
That's a free service. So you bring up monitoring. If you freeze the credit reports, you really don't need to monitor, because everything's frozen at that point. They can't get to it. So therefore, all you would be getting is a notice that somebody attempted to do a credit check.
Yeah, you're right.
And so you really don't need it at that point. So you don't need to really go spend money. You just need to protect yourself and lock it down. So you do the credit report, lock them down. You don't open documents. You don't click on links. You don't respond. The big thing is you don't respond. I mean, a lot of people would say, I got that email. I'm like, you're a joker. I don't look at that kind of stuff. Go away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bad move.
Yeah. Don't tell the individual you're live. Yeah. Don't engage. Just ignore it. Delete it. Delete the text.
So what I hear you telling me is I need to become a hermit and just hide in a hole in the ground and not interface with the world. That's what it sounds like.
So hard.
No, hide from the hackers.
6 texts a day from somebody, you are ready to just rip right back into them. And,
yep.
And
I block and delete a lot of numbers that come through. And as a rule nowadays, if I don't recognize the number and it's not saved in my phone, I will not answer. And I'm getting a lot of calls from nonprofits these days. And it even beyond like campaign election stuff, they're like nonprofits. And I had answered one, and they were fishing for information. And so after that, I'm like, no more. Not doing it.
I mean, if you want to mitigate some of the phone calls themselves, there are services you can provide that will do spam calls and block calls that are coming through that the number is blocked. So
I have that.
Yeah, and those services are pretty cheap. I've got one that does a pretty good job about blocking all the spam, and it'll send it to just like a junk folder on an email. Yep. We'll send it off.
I already have that, but the problem is, and it does block a lot, but some of them still come through.
Yep.
Like my phone's been popping up a lot lately. It says nonprofit organization.
But do they leave a voicemail?
No, they don't.
Then you in that case, yep. If the person doesn't have enough time to leave me a voicemail, it was probably spam, and so I ignore it. Mm-hmm. So I get quite a bit of that. So a lot of them go to the spam folder, or they go to a folder and it shows that there's no message. I don't respond to them, because if they didn't leave a message, to me they're probably phishing.
Could also mean they're under 23 years old and they're your child, because that's never leaves a message.
That way you just answer Department of Homeland Security. How may I help you?
Yes.
Yeah.
So we've talked a little bit about an individual level, right? At an enterprise level, what should businesses, like I said, I have multiple businesses, and this is a concern. I manage firewalls at my business, and then take it larger, medium-sized businesses, large businesses, corporate enterprises, state agencies. What should they be doing? Since the sophistication level of the spear phishing and the social engineering is getting really good between the
grammar's good, spelling's good.
Yeah. It's like they've got Grammarly sitting on top of their emails now. With PII, it's getting dangerously good. So let's talk through the enterprise side of how do you make sure you're prepared for this?
Yeah, because ChatGPT, I can go out and create an email to send to you. I can actually, no coding skills whatsoever. I can have ChatGPT actually write a program for me, no programming skills, write a program for me that I can use to do bad stuff. That's how advanced it is. But for an enterprise,
well,
to answer your question,
I don't want to paint AI as a bad thing. It's a tool that can be used for good or bad, right? And there are great examples of it being used for good, and there are examples of it being used to perpetrate fraud and ill. So I think there's going to be ways we fight back with automation and artificially intelligent capabilities. But yeah, I agree with you. They're using
good point. Good point. I should not be afraid of artificial intelligence. I should be running towards it. Bad guys are using it. I need to be using it to help me. So I need programs. I need things.
It's a weapons race.
Yes. Who can be on the offense versus the defense? And what we find typically right now is everybody's on the defense. The bad guys are already using it. Those guys are up 2, 3 in the morning. Hackers who work for me, they're up all night. We're trying to get into agencies' environments to tell them what they need to do to fix it and harden it. So from an enterprise level, because you've got 10, 100,000, 10,000 people working for you, you're expecting all them to be your security officers. That's not going to happen.
No.
I mean, they're getting paid, and they probably don't think they're getting paid enough. Therefore, why do I need to protect your interest? You get the profit, you get the money, not me. So what you have to do using, say, artificial intelligence or programs or applications, you need to see those emails coming in. Like I pointed earlier, you need to be examining those before they get to the employee. Don't put the employee in the position of determining whether that's a bad attachment or bad link. If I can take that email that's come in and put it in a sandbox and test that deliverable, that document that came in to validate that it's good versus bad, I don't have to rely on the employee. If I can check the links and make sure the links are good and only maybe allow internal links, don't allow any outside links, I can protect myself, my agency, my business from bad actors and not rely on the employees. Because if I go back and look at all the things we've done for many agencies, I mean, we're talking about things that are IT related right now, right? We also do physical security, and physical security is an agency wants to see how secure they are. They have badges, they have keys that you got to enter on elevators to get to certain floors. We do situations where we act like the bad guy coming in the building without a badge. We've been able to get into buildings without a badge.
Sure. With
the security guard sitting.
Yeah.
And we're able to get on floors that required a badge access or PIN access because all we had to do is sit there and wait for the elevator to come, get on the elevator, and wait for it to go to a floor and get off. Didn't need a badge to do that.
Yeah.
And so don't put the people in a position because, people, because we show up in a suit, open the door for us.
Yep.
They let us
if
in.
you can.
Yeah, they let me in.
Look like you belong.
Look like you belong. And that's what's happening with the bad actors is they're creating situations that look like they're part of the program, create a sense of urgency to get you to react. Hey, David, I need you to make this change quickly. Can you go ahead and get this done?
Yep.
I've talked to so-and-so. They have the org list, and they might know the pecking order, or they might have been looking at a board meeting or something, pulled information. They take that information using maybe artificial intelligence or some smarts, create a email, send it to you that looks like, hey, this is my organization telling me to do something. I better get it done.
Yeah, the fact that we're sitting at 68% today really tells us that that's not working. Your employee's not going to drop the ball if you don't toss him the ball. And that's what we're really saying is how do we stop that from even getting to them in the first place?
Yeah.
Because I don't want my employees focused on that.
No.
I want them focused on the job that they need to do. So,
Yeah, putting that burden on them in addition to what they're supposed to be doing as an employee of that company is it feels like it's only going to grow.
Yep.
So then it takes away from them doing their actual job. So you got to mitigate that on the front end. So if you're an agency CIO, right, or the state CIO or the state CISO or whatever leader has to put in enterprise security or an agency CISO, what should you be doing? Recognizing the threat vectors related to the individual, where I've always heard your greatest threat are your employees.
Yes.
This just got more complicated for employees, way more complicated. So what should CIOs and CISOs be doing, understanding that the breaches that occurred in the last 12 months have made the game a lot more intense?
Well, it hasn't just got more complicated for employee, it got more complicated for the agency.
You're right.
Because the bad actors have gotten smarter. So, you know, typically when something comes into our network, we look at certificates. So we authenticate through the certificate process to make sure it's not bad. They've gotten smart where, let's say we had a malware attempt and edit a certificate, and I'm able to see that certificate and say, oh, bad actor, kick it out. They're now tricking the systems to make it not recognize the fact that it's tied to malware. And they're doing things by embedding it in compressed zip files, things of that nature, so that it's getting hidden and it's hard for the system to detect. So the agencies have to get smarter. Again, it gets kind of back to a sandbox where you take and you just blow it up. It's like getting a bomb, right? I got a bomb. I don't know if it's going to blow. Put it somewhere, attempt to blow it. If it blows up, I know it's live. If it doesn't blow up, I know it's a dud. And that's essentially what agencies got to do is they have to get smarter in things coming into their environment. If it's coming from the outside, how do you detonate it before it gets to the employee? And that's what they got to do. If it's in the inside and they're comfortable it's on the inside and they've protected the walls to keep the bad actor out, then they're okay. But even that, once, I think I mentioned earlier, the bad actor, once he gets in, that employee clicked the email, opened up, and a malware was introduced, and 30 minutes later, I've got a back door in, he could be there 206 days before he does something. So you've got to do some kind of forensics to make sure that you don't have a problem today.
So I'm hearing robust network security, obviously, but clearly this conversation means they're finding ways in.
Or already in.
So then I'm hearing email security and secure email gateway and things like that, right? That's going to become very critical. I'm hearing conversations about probably privilege access management, access management. I'm hearing conversations about identity verification and authentication, like, do we know this person is who they say they are type of stuff. So how do you prioritize that as a CIO and a CISO to make sure you're doing all the right things in the right sequence at the right levels?
How do you keep the agency from just screeching to a halt?
Yeah.
If you're having to spend all of these times, I mean, that just sounds like delay after delay after delay, and a price tag.
Yep, there's a cost. Yeah, zero trust is where you start. You can't trust anybody at this point. I mean, even if you've got an employee who's not clicking an email, it's, you know, they could be working at an agency and want to do harm. They want to personally leak information.
Yeah.
And that's happened a lot. You've seen that in a lot of cases.
So that's an inside threat. Like,
That's an inside threat,
Let's
yes.
not even talk about that. That's a whole nother vector.
But inside threat, that's where information's getting siphoned out. And that kind of leads us back to the beginning where I'm trying to protect my environment and how can I help the employee not do my job for me. If I have the proper systems in place that can detect, and this is where artificial intelligence could become our friend and help us look for anomalies in the current network where things based on logs and past history, I see a change. It's a subtle change. Subtle enough that it should cause me to react and do something different.
This feels like a conversation from the movie The Matrix.
Yeah.
It's like a deja vu. There's a change in the code. Something's different.
It's exactly, that's what it is, because the bad guy, he wants to go unnoticed. Because if I come in and I break down a door, I crash a window, I'm noticed. You're going to capture me and you're going to kick me out. But if I come in and I'm subtle, back to the 260 days in your network, I'm siphoning information out slowly. You don't know I'm taking it. I've opened up an IP address, a back door, into an area that you're not watching. I'm sending stuff out. So I was able to find a way out a back door, and you don't know I'm doing it.
Does that mean an assessment of your system every? I mean, that's
well, it's daily. It's daily. You need to go back and hopefully agencies, businesses have done this where they've got logs of activity. They know their network and they're able to analyze their network. There's plenty of companies through SIMS that have actually helped you collect that information. And it's easy to look at that data and compare it, especially with all the data analytics and all the available programs that are out there now. I can see differences in the network and detect when something's happening. One of the things that my company has done is we developed this thing called Threat Board. So when it sees a abnormal situation, it then looks and says, okay, I've just seen some activity here. Where did it go? And we were able to graphically show it's now gone over here. When it got here, it spidered and went to different locations. And so there are things on the market that are available. And again, there's a price, and you got to have the skills, right? You got to have people who can monitor, who can put the things in place, configure it. So there is something that you got to do, but it's much cheaper than getting a ransomware attack, where on average now, when those attacks happen, they're anywhere from $800,000 to $1 million per attack that's happening. And I think the number last year was like 4,500 ransomware attacks that were paid out. And you look at the number of attacks that are happening, every 39 seconds, there's a potential hack occurring. Every 39 seconds. That's 100 an hour. There's on average 2,200 a day that's happening.
Sounds like a pretty lucrative business of fraud.
I told you ransomware as a service is the place to be.
I think I'm going to pass on that job opportunity. Man,
I'm not investing in it, David.
no,
Forget it.
no. But okay, so, and we've talked a little bit about enterprise, and it sounds like zero trust architecture is where you begin.
That's where you have to begin, because at this point you don't know what to trust. It's become so real.
Yeah.
And there's so many things to make it look like David sitting there in the chair having a conversation with me. I could plant somebody else sitting there, or even
this is my avatar.
Yeah, I could have you not even be sitting there. It's just a chair, and I have a green screen and make it look like you're there, and I can make it look like you're having a conversation with me. It's gotten that good, and I can do it on my phone. I mean, I, as an individual who have no experience with video, can sit there and transplant a voice on your head and make you talk.
It almost sounds like there needs to be a zero trust architecture for your home life.
Home life.
Because if this is just David at home, I don't have a sophisticated governance policy around IT like the business does or the agency does. So like just David trying to protect his family, like it sounds like don't click on the email. There's a lot of don'ts. There's a lot of rules there, Ernie.
Well, the other thing you could do is you need to apply those patches. They're a pain in the butt. Your TVs have updates. Those updates are usually patches because there's a vulnerability identified. You think, they're giving me an upgrade to give me fancier functionality. Yeah, maybe, but they're probably patching a vulnerability that was found. So you'll find your TV, if you got a smart TV, requires a lot of patches. Computers, I just noticed on computers, there's been multiple security patches in the last couple of weeks coming through on Microsoft. Your phone, I see pushes from Apple on my phone constantly. My Apple Watch, I get a lot of pushes on my phone, on my Apple Watch.
My
upgrades.
Android, it's like 3 times a week right now. It's kind of crazy, actually.
And you can't ignore it. You ignore it, you're basically turning your head that say, okay, I give you 3-day pass, Mr. Bad Guy. If you want to get in, get in. The door's open. And what I tell a lot of agencies and businesses when I talk to them, the bad actor is like the guy who shows up in your neighborhood and he's walking around your house and he's trying your front door. If the door opens, he walks in. He goes to a window. He tries the window. If the window slides open, he tries to get in. He's not looking for the hard way. He's not going to break down doors. He's not going to break the glass.
Yeah.
But it's much better if I go knock on the door and you just open the door and let me in. It's like clicking an email. You just let me in and I can do whatever I need to do.
Spear phishing.
Yes.
So at home, we don't respond
Yeah.
to the emails when they come in or the text messages when they come in.
If you don't know who they're from.
Right.
And you can't authenticate. That's probably the big thing. If you cannot authenticate, why take the risk?
Sorry to all the Penelopes out there. I'm not going to respond to you.
Then next one is, okay, not responding. What's our second one for at home?
Well, you need to make sure that you're updating. You're applying those patches to your cell phones, to your watches, to your TVs, to if you've got electronic refrigerator, cameras. I mean, all that stuff require patches, and the hackers are finding ways in. That's why there's patches to them.
Lock your credit down.
Lock your credit. That's
And your kids'
that's really the
credit.
first thing you should do. If you're going to do anything first, lock down your credit report. Don't expose yourself. Lock them down so they can't get to your credit.
We roll over to business and agencies. It is adopt my wife's dating principles when she met me, which was zero trust. I mean,
That sounds like a good rule of thumb anyway.
it was a tough road to go through. But that is huge
It
right
is.
now for our agencies.
Yep.
So
And it's putting all the stuff in place to allow zero trust. Because to your point, Jim, it's not easy and there is a cost to it.
Right.
I mean, to adopt a situation where you zero trust everything coming into the environment, you got to have things in order to capture it, to validate it. And so that doesn't come free. There's nothing out in the market that says, hey, we're going to put this in place for you. Microsoft's not giving it to you. You know, AWS is not giving it to you. So these are all things that you've got to do on your own and be prepared and have the resources to know how to do it.
there's a difference between cost and investment.
Yep.
And investment usually comes at a much smaller cost. So, doing those ahead of time.
Well, what is the value of being able to have your business or your agency still run? What's the value of making sure that your finances and your family and their credit and their future is protected? It's very much like the MasterCard commercial. What's it worth to you? What's the price of your freedom?
Yeah.
And so to your point, I think it's a very different conversation where days of old in IT, especially in state agency land or with the legislature, I think the conversation was this is a lot of cost around IT.
Right.
And to your point, you've got to look at it. It's an investment. It's an investment in security and the freedom to continue to operate. Because too often nowadays on the digital vector, you can bring people, organizations, enterprises to their knees. We've seen examples. You've listed a bunch of very large, well-heeled, very capable companies that have had significant breaches. And I will tell you, for every company, it's almost not a matter of if, but when. And then it's scary to even say it on an individual level. It's not a matter of if, but when someone's going to attempt to touch you or your family in either this type of spear phishing or blackmail or something. So be alert. Zero trust sounds like it's the word of the day.
Well, in the one thing that we didn't touch upon, there was actually a firm who did a study, and they planted a bunch of emails out on the dark web. So they purposely put emails out to see what would happen. What was the reaction? What was the consequences? When they first planted them out, in the first 6 hours, 18%, so 1 out of 5, was actually accessed. So the dark web, somebody purchased it, tried using that email. That's first 6 hours. Next 12 hours, that number jumped to 40%. In 24 hours, 50% of those email addresses had been tried. Now, okay, so you got the email, they got in, right? They got the passwords. What happened in their analysis is the bad guy only accessed the account one time. They didn't attempt 2 times, 3 times, 4 times. What they found is once they got in, they made some security changes. They made some rerouting of where emails got sent. So they started examining emails. They planted some malware that would analyze an email. When it came in, if it was important enough, they would route it. So now they're starting to collect information. Unknown to the individual, had you clicked on something and gave them access and they implanted malware on your system, they might be sitting there and they're looking at every email you receive at that point. And they're routing it and collecting information to do something worse at a later point. And so the significance of these hackers, they're not stupid. They're finding ways to get in. And once they're in, like I told you, 206 days sitting around, collecting, gathering, preparing for the attack. They're smart. And so they're using that information ongoing. And so, again, they're going undetected. One time, because if they keep trying, you're going to detect them.
Yep.
I try one time, I'm in, I do my dirty work, I get out, I let the system do my dirty work unnoticed.
Ernie, I'm I'm not sure I like talking with you. You make it very difficult.
Go home,
to
unplug
sleep.
your
Yeah,
computer.
I'm gonna unplug my router. Just
Shut
no.
my phone off in the shredder. Ernie, thank you very much for coming by today. We have so much more we can dig into
yes.
on this, and I'd like to invite you back and have you part of this conversation with us again, David. Thank
And
you.
hopefully it's not talking about another me as a use case on the
I
next
was
one.
going to say, you volunteered the first time to be
Yep.
attacked, so now if you could just set it up one more time.
Well, we need David to go home and click on a link or
There.
physically
Yeah, let's
open
not-
it and
nope.
tell us what
That would
happens.
be helpful.
Yeah, tell us what happens.
It's going to be
let's not do
exciting
that.
next episode.
Sounds like something I should outsource.
Ernie, thank you.
Well, I
Yes,
appreciate
thank
it.
you.
Thank you guys for inviting me. Thank you.
You bet.